Hello, I'm the biochemist and I've got an experiment. I'm searching for the highs, the lows, and the mids of the PlayStation catalog here on the PS1 Deep Dive. Comment below to recommend what games I should play next and subscribe for everything PS1. Today we're looking at the rectangular phenom himself, SpongeBob SquarePants in Super Sponge. We'll talk about the game, the personal vendetta I have against it, and one of the game's creators, so stay tuned. But first we start where all games start, and that of course is the cover art. 30 seconds, let's go. Yeah, this gets the job done. Can't complain much since it retains the exact same art style that the show had at the time. SpongeBob is front and center and the other main characters for the game are in the background. He's an iconic character, so the cover doesn't really have to play around much. You know you want to get this game if you're a kid in 2001. Yeah, baby.
This is the greatest day of my life!
SpongeBob SquarePants Super Sponge was released in 2001 in Europe, Australia, and North America. And it was curiously also ported to one other system, the Game Boy Advanced. Makes me wonder how many games are just on the PS1 and the GBA, but that's for another video, I guess. Anyway, Super Sponge became a greatest hit in North America, with VG charts estimating over 1.5 million units sold worldwide. THQ published it, and it was developed by a group called Climax Group Limited. That's a great name. Alright, so like I said at the start, I've got a bit of a vendetta against this game. Story time with Biochemist, baby!
Story time!
So, when I was a child, I had Super Sponge for the PS1, and another little game called Kingdom Hearts for the PS2. I was just getting into Kingdom Hearts. I thought it was pretty damn cool. It was real new at the time, and the graphics were sweet as hell. Being a kiddo though, my attention span was rather short, so I would swap out games quite a bit. And being a lazy kid as well, I would often just stack my discs on top of each other. Well, on one hot summer day, I took out the Kingdom Hearts disc I had in my PS2 and put it on top of my Super Sponge, making a little Krabby Patty out of the two. A few days later, when I wanted to play Kingdom Hearts again, to my shock, to my horror, the art on top of the SpongeBob disc had melted onto the Kingdom Hearts disc, rendering the Square Enix game unplayable and leaving the THQ game maimed and disfigured. But it still worked. I couldn't bear to play it though after it took away Kingdom Hearts from me, so this is something of a redemption run, I guess you could say, for Super Sponge.
End of flashback.
So we start, first thing we see is this awesome anime intro.
SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, Sandy, Larry, Pearl, Mr. Krabs, and Plankton.
I was impressed by some of the presentation that the game had. The voice cast was mostly all there to reprise their roles. Mr. Krabs wasn't, sadly. It made it feel like a true extension of the show. Everyone gave it their all too, so the game had a lot of charm instantly added by their inclusion. Other sounds were a bit disappointing though. To me, the most prominent one was SpongeBob's shoes. They squeak the entire game as you move around, but it's not the exact sound from the show, which is odd to me. How can they not just lift that sound and put it in the game? I don't know. Even worse though, the music is also not from the show, and I don't think it does a great job emulating the Hawaiian style music the show had. Really, it was just serviceable at best. The graphics though are pretty crisp, I'd say. I enjoy how they mostly kept the cartoon aesthetic, but made the undersea world out of 3D elements a lot. It honestly kind of reminded me a bit of Tone Buff, so shout out to that video, go check it out. The sprite for SpongeBob was a little weird looking to me at first, being a pseudo 3D thing, but I got used to it pretty quick. All the other characters that show up are a bit closer to the show's representations though. SpongeBob, I guess they had to finagle a bit because you have a lot more animations with him. So the story in Super Sponge is about SpongeBob trying to get his friend Patrick the autographs of their idols, the retirees Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, who are stuck in the old folks home. They keep giving SpongeBob these fetch quest missions, and our naive, porous hero keeps helping them out. Each level you gotta find a different item that Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy need. It's not too hard to find them though. Each item is just at the end of each level, so you don't have to do too much exploring. The levels are your pretty standard 2D platforming affair. In most, you get an item that helps you out, each a reference to an episode in this TV show. At the start, you typically get the jellyfish, and then some levels have special items like the water helmet from Sandy's Dome. You get the reef blower, which is a little annoying because it weighs SpongeBob down a bit, but whatever. You also get the Glove World balloon here and there. You get the squeaky boots from that one episode, and you get this like rocket launcher thing that shoots jellyfish. That was fun too. SpongeBob controls pretty well, I'd say. It's pretty tight. You always feel like you have complete control over him. He doesn't have too much momentum, so He's pretty snappy. You also get this like Sonic-esque rings health system. Instead of picking up the gold rings, you pick up golden spatulas around the levels, and every time you get hit, you lose all those spatulas. You get a few seconds to pick them all up, just like in Sonic. No spatulas, you get hit, you die. This method of health, I'd say, made this game pretty easy. Yeah, I'll say it. I kicked the shit out of this game because it's so fucking easy.
You said number 11.
So, each level you find an item, nothing crazy here, but the voice acting I mentioned before did keep my interest. If anything, that's what made me want to progress in the game, because they were pretty funny performances and the writing was pretty well done. It kept the spirit of the show alive, I think.
You kid, you must really love your mate Trevor.
It's, Patrick.
Whatever.
Along with the items, there are references to important places and to important episodes like SB129, that episode where Squidward goes back in time. In stage 3 of this game, SpongeBob finds a time machine, and he too goes back in time to prehistoric times. It's not exactly a one-for-one recreation of that episode, but it's definitely a reference to it. You also get to go to Rock Bottom in stage 4, and of course you get to see places like Bikini Bottom, Sandy's Tree Dome, and the Fish Hook Park from that one episode where they put the fish hooks in their mouth, and yeah. Enemies like the large jellyfish, Man Ray, and the Flying Dutchman make appearances too. There are a lot of other enemies that are just kind of generic, but they do seem to fit pretty well and they gel well with the underwater world of SpongeBob, so I can't really complain. You gotta have some type of generic enemies. They actually made Man Ray into a generic enemy instead of just a boss, which I thought was weird, but whatever. Artistic liberties, I guess. The game came out in 2001, and SpongeBob the show debuted in 1999, so the franchise was still pretty fresh when Super Sponge came out. Playing this back in the day was a blast, and it still is, to be honest, if you're a fan of the show. Sadly, the final boss is just a random enemy that isn't all that special. You beat him, SpongeBob goes back to the old folks' home, and he fixes the TV for Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. Now satisfied, the two give SpongeBob their autograph, and the game's just kind of done. Super Sponge feels like an episode of the show, which is a good thing, but also feels like the rushed ending would come out of a 12-minute mediocre episode, you know? The game lasted only 2 or so hours, which can be annoying to some, but considering how huge games are today, it was honestly kind of refreshing to just be able to play a game and beat it real quick. There was something kind of weird with my game though. I don't know, maybe it was my copy or something because I got it from like a yard sale or whatever, but when I got a game over screen, it looked like this. That's pretty weird, right? I don't know what's going on there. Now, this is the part of the video where we dive into the credits and learn a bit about somebody who made this game. Today, we're talking about one Mark Davies. Mark was a designer for SpongeBob Super Sponge who seemed to get his start in the games industry on this platformer. According to his LinkedIn, he went to the University of Portsmouth where he studied computer science and actually worked as a web designer in his first year out of college. He then moved to Climax Group, where he worked on a handful of games. Side note, Climax is actually a fairly prolific company I just have never heard about before somehow. They've been around since the 80s and have worked on some of the later Silent Hill titles, Castlevania Lord of the Shadows, Assassin's Creed Chronicles, and even a recent game called Returnal you may have heard of. Anyway, back to Mark. Davies hopped over to Ninja Theory in 2005, where he was a lead designer for Heavenly Sword and Enslaved Odyssey to the West, some pretty solid titles from the PS3 era. He then hopped over to Naughty Dog where he helped design Uncharted 4 and Last of Us Parts 1 and 2. He's still there as a lead designer according to his LinkedIn, and it all started with this little game about a sponge trying to get some autographs from 2 old farts. Mark's had a pretty solid career, I'd say, working for some big prolific studios.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
Hey, SpongeBob, happy birthday! You made it, bud. One more year.
Happy birthday! Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, SpongeBob! Happy birthday!
Stand still while I take your picture.
Thank you all for joining me for Super Sponge today. If you enjoyed, please leave a comment recommending another PS1 game, and I'll spin that wheel sometime soon to see what game I play next. But next week, we're going to be tackling Gran Turismo, just in time for the movie, baby. See ya.